All right. So I wanted to put this small little quick lecture together for you guys. That way we can go over critical thinking and creativity when creating your home exercise program and also when creating your treatment plans. When I first started off, a lot of my plans were based on templates or looking up in the rehab book, suggested exercises, getting on four legs and seeing what she would do. And then over the years, it's changed so that I'm no longer dependent on plans that are already made. And I can now see a case and think critically through it and create a plan specifically for that patient. So I see you guys are all in different areas. Some of you are already thinking critically and able to create custom plans. Others that you guys are newer to the field, so you're starting to get there. And so I just wanted to give some suggestions on how I think through the cases. That way, no matter what comes to the door, you can handle that case and you can create a plan or a home program specifically for that patient. So this strategy is, you know, I think useful for those that, are seeing exotics, birds, turtles, rabbits, or even cats. I also utilize a lot with our neurologic patients. So any case where it doesn't follow the standard typical post-op, protocol. And this is, I think, the difference between pretty skilled therapists and therapists that are novice, or ones that are able to think critically about their cases and, treatment plan, specific for that patient versus just week one, we do this, week two, we do that. So the types of cases this strategy applies to are just any of the disasters that walk through the door, any complicated case, anything that doesn't follow post-op TPLO or FHO protocol. I think it comes in pretty handy for our neurologic patients. They present with pretty unique challenges in their daily function or mobility. Exotics, like I mentioned earlier, it comes in handy. Reason why is because you can't have a bunny do 20 sit to stands, and you can't always ask a cat to do so many reps of a certain exercise. So a lot of times you have to adapt the exercise to the natural environment, their behavior and movement. And a lot of times I create a plan around mealtime too. So we'll go over suggestions on how to approach these unique cases. The first strategy I utilize a lot is thorough history taking, and not just our standard asking the questions that's in our treatment or in our record already, but being specific about the client's concerns. So when I would take history, I'd ask clients, what are their main concerns? What challenges exist in the environment? And getting it down to specifically what happens at home that makes them concerned about their pet and where they need help. So is the pet slipping on the floors? Are they falling over? Are they struggling with the stairs? Are they knuckling, falling while turning corners? They can't get comfortable in the bed. They can't get up to get their food or water bowl. And then what challenges exist in their daily activities? I think this is a big one, and especially for some of our cases, like Velica, where they were very specific on a movement that their pet couldn't do. So one would be, can't get in and out of the litter box. That was one that we were seeing Monk for at the very beginning, was because Monk couldn't get in and out of his litter box. He also couldn't squat and hold a squat in his litter box. So that becomes a part of our treatment plan and a part of reaching those goals, and how are we going to reach those goals. They can't bend over to or up to eat or drink, can't transition in and out of bed, can't hold a squat to urinate or defecate, can't urinate on their own. Any fecal incontinence that we need to address, or urinary incontinence, I do think we need to be addressing pretty early on. They can't hold a stand when eating, or they can't transition to get up or down. So, when taking your history, just remember basic life stuff that the pet needs to do, such as eat, sleep, pee, and poo, and all the mobility that is required to do each one of those activities. The reason why I think it's really important that we are asking those specific questions in our rehab plan is based on addressing those concerns at home, is because, we want to make sure that we prevent caregiver fatigue. So, when you have a patient that is high maintenance, and a lot of times these complicated cases are, whether it be neurologic or exotic or exotics, it can be incredibly exhausting on the clients at home. And it could lead to fatigue if we're not addressing those concerns at home, which often leads to euthanasia. I think until one has gone through it themselves, until one has lived with a dog that was paralyzed and try to get them all the way back up to full function, or has lived with a bunny or cat that has mobility issues, it's hard to understand what their day-to-day life is like with them and the stressors that occur with it. So I think it's important that we're asking all of those questions and we're making sure we try to relieve those stressors for them. That way we can keep moving forward with the rehab plan. So, some strategies to those challenging cases. After I take that history, I pretty much make a list of specific concerns. So, what I mean by that is it's not, hey, my dog has difficulty getting up. I then, dive in more onto the exact movements or the exact challenges. I think Velica is a great example. Velica was the little bunny that we were rehabbing for a while. And her clients would come to each session with a different concern. So we would design her rehab plan based on whatever their concerns were that day. So it wasn't a typical plan where week one we're doing this and, oh, next time I see her, I'm going to work on this exercise. It was whatever they presented with us that day that they were struggling with at home. And they were very specific. So they would tell us, she's having a hard time moving. And I would have to ask them specifically, what does that mean? Like, what does it look like? That way I can help create the plan. So is it moving? She can't get up into an upright position. Can she hop straight? Can she not turn? Like what is the specific movement that we need to do? So here are some examples. I just went through her record and I pulled out things that I took, in my history taking that I've noticed. So they said that she was struggling with urine scald. At one point, she was struggling to get in and out of the litter box because there was a ledge that she had to go over, and we were addressing that in her rehab appointments. And we did get to her to the point where she could go in and out of the litter box. She falls on her left side and can't get back up. So that was a big one that we worked on for a bit. I think with her, we did get her to the point where she could right herself. And when she moves, she can only go in a circle. So if I remember, Velica was when she first started off, she could only like go in a direction. I think it was like towards the right, and that she could not go straight and she could not go left without losing her balance. Her left hind limb splays out and she struggles to even pull that left hind limb in, and her left forelimb would be held straight forward. So that also added to her falling over to her left. So I wrote those down. There were very specific things that we needed to work on. And every session, I would take one of their concerns that they brought forth that day, and we would work on that concern. And that was the basis of our treatments. That was the basis of our home exercise program. And that was the basis of our treatment plan moving forward. So each one of those concerns, I then broke it down into what function is needed to do that activity, and then breaking that function down into baby steps. So for example, Velica falls to her left side and she can't get back up. So in order to correct this, she has to learn to transition from lateral to sternal. But it's not just that simple to have a bunny that does not have a hind limb and that has paralysis in the front limbs to just go from lateral to sternal. So I broke it down into baby steps. So I took that movement going from lateral to sternal. So to right herself, she has to side bend her cervical region to the right. So I was thinking if she's lying down in left lateral because she just fell over, she has to side bend her cervical area to the right. So I prescribe for them at home to just work on cookie stretches in sternal and in lateral to the right. Then the next movement, after bending the head to the right, there has to be a side crunch in order for the bunny to get herself upright. So we practiced that. I would have Derek place her left lateral, and I would have him work on side crunches at home so that she can grab her leafy green. And it was specifically to the right. She also has to pull in her left hind limb. So she has to tuck that left hind limb because it was extended straight out to be able to eventually get to a sternal position. So I was having him work on toe pinches while she was lying in left lateral. And then we combined all those 3 movements together, where she would have to bend her neck to the right, do a side crunch to the right while getting her left hind limb, toe pinch so that she would do the withdrawal reflex. So that, we went over that in the session and he video recorded all of that and he worked on it at home. And it was really cool to see how much she improved and she was able to eventually write herself. Eventually, it was transitioning the spine into a sternal position. So when she had those 3 previous motions down, we practiced combining it all and then also bringing her head to the side and then doing a semicircle forward. So that way she would pop up sternally. And then after that, it was learning to hold a sternal. So holding a sternal with weight shifting and head movements without falling back over to the left. So altogether, take the needed movement, break it into baby steps, and then each step can become their home exercise program. So this is Velika in one of the sessions that Phoebe recorded, and this is her at the point where we're doing the side bend to the right, a side crunch, and then a semicircle where she pops sternal.
She makes it look easy when she does it.
Okay, here's another video. I placed her in left lateral, had her practice, yep, bending her cervical and then bringing her forward. So cervical side bending, side crunch, semicircle to come forward. And that was her home program. So that way we could address that concern that she was going down in left lateral and she couldn't get herself back up. So another one of their concerns in later sessions was that Velika's forelimb remained extended in various positions, preventing her from getting up. So because her front limb would extend straight out, she didn't have the ability to pull it under her, which meant she didn't have the ability to go from sternal to a sit, which would lead into a hop. So in order for her to hop around, she had to get that limb pulled in and tucked under her. So I, you know, took the movement, broke it down. It's essentially a forelimb withdrawal, and she has to be able to do it in lateral, sternal, and sit. And that's what became her our goals as far as her home exercise program. So first, I would just have Derek practice during cuddle time with Velika, just holding her forelimb inflection. And then doing little shoulder bounces or little like pulls with the finger pulling the leg in. So that way we can get comfortable with the position of just having the leg in a flexed position. The other thing that we worked on was trying to get creative with coming up with ways to keep her front limb in. And so in one session, I just spent the whole session playing around with different ways to wrap with an ace bandage to keep that leg flexing. So I didn't have a template or any example on how to ace bandage. I just played around with the bandage to see if we can get to a point where the leg was tucked in, and it actually worked. And so by placing her in that flex position in the front limb, she was able to get up into a sit position and hop around. A part of her home exercise program was just practicing toe pinches and lateral, practicing toe pinches and sternal. And then once we had her in sternal, I would have her practice going from sternal to with her head going up as if she was going to initiate a sit. And then I would toe pinch her front limb so that she hurried and lifted up and pulled it back to push herself up into a sit. So it's combining those movements. So together, take the needed movement, break it into baby steps. So this is her little vest that they ended up making because the ace bandage was a little complicated for them to remember all the twists that I did to keep her leg in. But as you can see, she can now hop around with just the addition of that harness or that wrap around her front limb. She can now pull the leg in, hold it there, and be able to push off of it to hop. On the left picture, this is it unclipped, and this is what her leg looked like when she didn't have that harness on, it would just extend straight out. So another example is Expo, who you guys saw this week. Expo is the one that motivated me or gave me the idea that, oh, we should probably put together a webinar on this. So Expo's mom came in and she was very specific on what she wanted us working on. She said Expo had a hard time going down into sit, and when he would sit, he would use the wall to kind of slide down, and he was always lazy sitting. So obviously we don't have a treatment plan already made or a protocol to follow for how we're going to correct that. So I just wanted to walk through my thought process on how I came up with Expo's treatment plan to work on over the next few sessions. So in order to hold a square sit, he has to be able to learn to pull his leg in and hold it in a flex position. He has to be able to reposition his pelvis and his lower back and side bend his pelvis. He has to also get comfortable with flexion and extension in his pelvis. The other thing that he has to work on is going from a stand down into a sit. So he has to have pretty good eccentric control of his quadriceps to be able to move all the way down from a stand into a sit without flopping over to the side. So one of the very first things I was working on is just, I think we should work on toe pinches and lateral and in a sit so that he learns that very first movement of, oh, if I'm going to sit square, I have to pull that leg in. That's the very first movement is to get my legs under me. Then it's toe pinches joined with cookie stretches to the opposite side. So if you have a dog that is lazy sitting with the legs straight out, very first movement is pull leg in. After that is shifting over so that the pelvis is sitting square. So they have to go from lying on one hip to sitting square. So in order to do that, to practice that, you could do a cookie stretch to the right or the opposite side of wherever the dog is, the leg that is extending out so that they're lazy sitting on. So for let's say he is lazy sitting on the right hip and the left hind leg is stretching out. You would toe pinch the left hind limb so that it tucks in while doing a cookie stretch with the head to the right so that the hip pops over, so that he pops over closer towards his left hip, but then stop him when he's square. You could practice just cookie stretches in sternal and in sit so that he works on, popping from one hip to square to the other hip. Um, Transitions from lateral to the other side of the lateral is another way to practice getting that rotation on the spine and going from one hip to another. I did sternal reaches to get a pelvic tilt. So he has to learn to extend his pelvis and then also flex his pelvis with, I believe, cat cows in his home program. If he is lazy sitting, having him reach forward to grab a treat and then a cookie stretch to the opposite side to position square is another trick to do. Um, and then while in the square sit, practicing cat cow, head side to side, hip bouncing, weight shifting, wobbling on a rocker board. That way he practices maintaining that position without just flopping over and losing it. So he builds up all those stabilizers. When thinking about his um, lack of control when he goes from a stand to a sit, I was thinking that I would break that movement down into smaller parts. So a lot of the exercises that you guys see, and that I've seen you guys do, such as toe pinches and standing, mini squats, rock backs, those aren't anything I learned from anywhere. Those were like just exercises that I made up, trying to mimic a movement and part of a functional movement, and just breaking it down into baby steps. So that's where mini squats came from. So just taking the head up and starting the motion of going into a sit and then herring and popping back up until we get stronger. For him, I thought it would be cool if we did a mini squat and then when he's in that squat position, just holding it. That way he can build up his strength and his stability even more, progressing to half sit to stands and then eventually full sit to stands. Another example where I've kind of utilized this breaking everything down into baby steps is I've had a few cases before where the clients talked about, the dog would fall over to one side. I think Teddy is a great example. So Teddy falls over to the, like, whatever side it is, whether it's left or right, and he doesn't pick up his foot and sidestep to correct it. where you can take that one movement and break it down. So, in order to not fall over in the hind limbs when falling, when or leaning to one side, the dog has to be able to sense the hind limb. They have to be able to lift up that leg, and they have to be able to abduct that hip and take a step to catch themselves so that they don't fall over. So you could break up the exercises into small movements. First is just proprioception, so vibrating, tapping, tickling the legs. You could also do small pushes into the hip just to mimic the slight falling over motion while scratching, tapping, and tickling those muscles, asking them to start firing. Um, y- then I worked on toe pinches and standing with these patients before. So, the very first movement to correct that fall or to catch themselves is that they have to lift up the foot. So you could do toe tickles or you could do toe pinches just to start getting them to lift up their leg. After that, it's then taking abducting the hip and taking a side step. So you can teach the dog to target and lift up the hip and touch a surface or touch a hand to initiate that very first start of a side step. And then you could combine it all together. So you could push on the hip while you're tickling the toes so that the dog picks up the foot and eventually takes a side step. So you're just combining all your small movements together. Um, so if you get in the habit of breaking any movement down into many steps, you will have many exercises that are laid out for your future sessions and your home exercise program. And a lot of the exercises, we don't have videos of this in our home exercise program, so we'll have clients video record them. That way, they can do that specific exercise at home. So, in summary, ask the right questions when taking history, address function, mobility, daily activities in their environment. With exotics, you are addressing the environment a lot and their mobility around their environment and their daily activities for survival. To create your treatment plan and to address the client's concerns. Create a list of concerns. Just make sure that you're specific on the list of concerns and then break each concern down into the function that is needed to do the activity and then break each function into baby steps. That becomes your home exercise program and your plan. And don't forget to have clients video record just because these aren't typical exercises in our already program.